Two prominent Labor senators have launched bitter public attacks over the Prime Minister's treatment of veteran Senator Trish Crossin after her emotional farewell speech to Parliament yesterday. Julia Gillard dumped the long-serving Labor senator earlier this year in order to parachute Indigenous Olympian Nova Peris into a safe Senate seat. Senator Crossin's valedictory speech has reopened old wounds and renewed calls for the decision to be reversed.
A teary Trish Crossin reflected on her time in politics, but was dry-eyed about the way it ended.
This is grossly unfair, it's undemocratic, and it is not the Labor way.
The veteran senator was dumped in January in favour of Indigenous Olympian Nova Peris. The captain's pick, which ended a 15-year political career, has sparked outrage within the Labor Party at a time when the captain could use some team spirit.
And you have made a contribution over many years, and I am appalled at the treatment that my party treated you with.
And while I wish Trish's successor every success, as I do every single endorsed Labor candidate across this Commonwealth, I still maintain that, Trish, you were treated unjustly.
Others within the party were burying their heads.
I didn't hear the bitterness anywhere, but I was there to recognise her great contribution to the Senate on behalf of the Northern Territory. I think she's done a great work. Thank you.
Was she treated fairly?
Senator Crossin's coalition counterpart was capitalising on the disquiet with a plea to the man who once said he was here to help.
Kevin, if you're listening, mate, and you are going to do something, there is still time to undo a great wrong. There is still time, mate.
The ABC was unable to contact Nova Peris, and a spokesman says she's away on a bush trip. She's staying silent while her predecessor refuses to go quietly. Lauren Day, ABC News.
Senator Crossin.
Thank you, Mr. President. In June 15 years ago, I stood in this chamber and gave my first speech. I promised myself I wasn't going to do this. Anyway, I've checked today to make sure that Senator Vanstone is not about. So hopefully I'll get this one finished. Back then I was stopped at the 20-minute mark exactly. You might recall that, Senator Faulkner, and history will show how that was resolved. But I also got a note passed to me in those fleeting seconds, which seemed like hours, from former Senator Dr. Poyer, which said, "You've pissed off Amanda. You're my hero." So it helped me come to the realisation that colleagues in this place don't always come from your own party. And so started my journey in this place. The first woman to be elected to the federal parliament from the Northern Territory. The first woman to be elected to the Senate from the Northern Territory. The first person to speak an Indigenous language in this chamber in my first speech. And now, as of last November, the longest serving senator from the Northern Territory. So maybe, Nige, you might get to beat my record after all, mate. So I've sat in this chamber, in these seats, 873 days out of the last 15 years so far. I've attended at least 2,470 divisions, and I've spent in excess of, wait for it, 3,500 hours of my life with Qantas, flying here, coming to and from sittings. Sometimes I thought I saw more Qantas stewards than my own family. So being elected to the federal parliament is an amazing experience, and coming into the Senate provides you with the unique opportunity to be one and part of the best democracies in the world. I'm here, of course, to say thanks to the Labor Party members of the Territory who have supported me 5 times during the pre-selection process over those years. And I'll talk about the 6th time in a few minutes. And I want to thank the voters in the Territory for having the confidence in my ability to represent them here in Canberra. I hope Hans started recording this infamous cough, by the way. So let me start by thanking Mark, my husband, a best friend, a great support and a solid rock. Leaving you at home with 4 children, the youngest of 2 at the time was a big ask, and your work and guidance, at times pretty critical, was welcome though. And the challenges that we faced together during this time were invaluable. To Paul, my eldest, thank God I taught you to cook. There's no time to tell the spaghetti story here tonight, but thanks for helping out. Thanks for being there in many different ways during those years and being a good support. And Mel, from a teenager to a forthright, confident, professional young woman. And Mandy, a great campaigner, political strategist, and now a competent union official, who declared 20 minutes after the polls closed in 2007, "It's a Rudd-slide," and that was the banner that was used in the local newspaper on the next day. To Miss Kate, who was only 2 years old when I first stood here in this chamber, riding Teletubby scooters outside the President's office and sliding around on polished wooden floors at the opening of Parliament, and wondering how we counter division when everybody in here has eyes and noses. Annabelle Crabb once described you as a serious insect. You are a confident, smart young woman who now has the world at her feet. So during this time, we've had 2 weddings and 4 wonderful grandchildren. Mr. Lachlan Simpson, who thought I had the coolest office in the world because it was underground, so I must obviously work with Batman. And Miss Jade Simpson, who loved all the moons hanging from the roof. Of course, that's the clocks. And Mr. Seth Reid, my champion, and now little Kobe, who's here today, only 11 weeks old. To my sons-in-law, Ben and Greg, who don't care about politics at all, quite frankly, but sat around our table each week just putting up with it. To my sister Anne and brother-in-law Peter, wow, thanks for being here today, what a surprise. And thanks for your support. And to my mum, finally. Hi Mum, I'm going to wave to you. After all those years, you've watched Question Time and you've said to me, how come you never get to wave to me? Well, this is my big chance. And thanks for your collection of Amanda Vanstone comics, the articles you sent me about her, and the political discussions we've had over the years. To my unbelievable, supportive friends, my kitchen cabinet, Sue Murphy, Gillian Harrison and Anne Lindy, I can't find the words to thank you enough. To my comrades in the trade union movement, especially the NTEU, where I learned so many of my skills to do this job, thank you so much. To my colleagues in the Senate, to Kim and Claire, to Gavin, Carol, to Doug, Ursula, and both Anns. And from the other place, Anthony Albanese, Simon Crean, Robert McClelland, and Kevin Rudd, thanks for your guidance and support. And those of you from other political parties across this chamber, thanks for your friendship and especially your support in the last few months. My staff over these years, Kate Lynch, Peter Carmichael, Chris Hallett, who is here today, John Pryor, Leslie, who is also here, Kimberly, Matthew Bock is here, what a champion, and Golden, who is here as well, and many others, thanks for your work and advice. It seems so quick today to say thank you, but your work was always appreciated. And to Carla and Amanda, for many years of work, supportful, joyful team spirit, from pushing planes to dealing with donkeys at polling booths, weeks, endless weeks of mobile polling. But my very special acknowledgement goes to Alison for being not just my right-hand person, but the person that my family and I relied on so much. I knew this would get me. We have worked together for actually 23 years, not 15. How can I ever repay you for what you have done, for being there, for your wisdom and your guidance? Anytime, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 10 o'clock at night, and all the time. So, thanks to Rosemary Brissenden, who I hope is listening, and I know Michael is here, for your friendship and for housing me for years. And to the Murphys for the roof over my head. To the clerks of the Senate, Dr. Lang, Harry Evans, Cleaver Elliott, our dear friend Anne Lynch, and the many other Senate staff. What an outstanding operation. To my Legal and Constitutional Committee team, how lucky was I to get to chair such an intelligent, professional group of people to work with. Thank you for absolutely everything that you have done. And to all the other committee staff I have come to know and work with, even those who have retired, John Carter, Peter Hallahan, thank you so much. To the chamber staff, you make life in here seamless and easy, thank you. To Hansard, Broadcasting, Parliamentary Services, men and women in the Security Office, the Parliamentary Education Office, the way, too many really to name each and every one of you, but all highly skilled and providing a first-class service. The Parliamentary Library, the best collection of this country's smartest minds, and I don't just mean the books, but the people in it. Your knowledge and ability to assist in this place is a great asset and should always be well funded and independent. To everyone in Comcar, you are truly our best mates, ever reliable and friendly. Thank you for caring about us personally. Some weeks, you are the only ones who do. To Tim, and previously Kate in the dining room, thanks for looking after my guests and I over the years. And finally to Dom and the team in Aussies. This might be the one very year, after 15 years, that I get to collect on our bet. He's a Carlton supporter and I'm Essendon. So I won't even be there to see the sad look on his little Carlton face to take his $50 this year. He better post it to me. I clearly remember my first speech. The 19th of May this year marks 15 years since senior traditional owner Yvonne Margarula was arrested on her land for trespass, her own country at Jabiluka. It is now time to return this parcel of land to the World Heritage Park and amend the mining lease. This would be the true meaning of closing the gap and recognising that the mining world respects the wishes of these traditional owners and will leave that land alone for all time. To my constituents in Katherine, you experienced one of the worst floods in recent times back in 1998 and again just a few years ago. I admire your resilience and sense of community that continues in the face of adversity. I will desperately miss the wonderful communities of Christmas and Cocos Island, and I recognise the representatives from Christmas Island here today. I know I have made lifelong friends in these places. I've sat on the National Capital and External Territories Committee for 15 years, and I have proudly represented your issues here in Canberra, protecting booby birds, red migrating crabs and robber crabs, to recognising the unique and difficult circumstances of having the country's most intimidating detention centre on your soil. And while your communities share friendship and acceptance for one another, you deserve much more support for the complex issues that continue on your beautiful home and wonderful tourist destination. Cocos Island needs a permanent recreation centre, a decent cyclone shelter now, as it houses so many people asking for refuge. And on Christmas Island, there are many volunteers who are yet to receive the recognition from this country that they deserve for the role they played on that tragic day 2 years ago. I have co-authored a book on the stolen generation to be used during the 2000 Olympics. And as you know, I continue to lobby for compensation for members of the NT stolen generation. If we can find $21 million to fund the movie 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, oh, surely, what more can I say? It just leaves me speechless. I have supported the NT Working Women's Centre and recently gained 4 years funding for its operation. In estimates, nearly 9 years ago, I asked, naively, how many people in this country have trachoma? And the answer was, we don't know. This led to another long story. Finally, in 2009, thanks to you, Kevin, $17 million for the eradication of trachoma. And I'm thrilled to see that further funding for this important program was provided again in the budget this year. The title of 5 heritage houses at Miley Point are now under the National Trust. I have campaigned against the abolition of bilingual education and mandatory sentencing. I managed to get a community consultative committee established with the increased presence of refugees being detained in Darwin, and secured a Northern Territory rep on the Immigration Minister's Advisory Committee. But my memories of this place go back to being an active member of the Parliamentary Group on Population and Development, lobbying for improvements on the reproductive rights of women, actively involved in stem cell research legislation and access to RU486. Former Senator Webber is here and will remember that well. Establishing the Asthma Parliamentary Support Group, lobbying, lobbying for the building of the childcare centre in Parliament House, and it's here. Loads and loads of story about that journey, but the excuse that the division bells would wake the babies really got me going that day. Getting the opposition whip your own entrance. So, Senator Bushby, you can thank me for your own door. The work in the Senate committees I truly enjoyed, and will fondly remember questions on Indigenous hearing and sight, fighting Senator Carr for just 1 hour for Indigenous education in estimates, the rights of donor-conceived people, and endless matters relating to migration law and refugees. It would seem from the selection of committee reports today that hasn't quite stopped yet. I initiated the review of the Sex Discrimination Act 4 years ago, which led to some major amendments to this legislation. I initiated and tabled the Marriage Equality Bill in the Senate last year. And can I just say, as a country, we just need to step up to the plate and recognise that people love each other regardless of the sex of their partner, and they want to be with that person for the rest of their life. So let's just get over it and let's just do it. Last December, I was appointed Chair of the Joint Select Committee on Constitutional Recognition for Indigenous People. So the highlights of my time include being part of the ALP gaining government in the Northern Territory in 2001, and of course, winning the federal election in 2007. Meeting Barack Obama, representing this parliament overseas, visiting the Antarctic, and chairing the Indonesian Parliamentary Friendship Group. But the Labor Party was formed 120 years ago to improve the lives of ordinary workers, to build this nation, and to give us a fair share in a growing economy. Our platform talks about opportunity, responsibility and fairness. We've always been the champions of change, but always the defenders of rank and file involvement in developing our policies and choosing who will represent us at all levels of government. So I can't give my valedictory speech and not mention the final steps in my journey. Do we need more women in Parliament? Well, of course we do, but not at the expense of each other. And do we need Indigenous representation? Most certainly, but not in a vacuum, without a plan or without a strategy. Just because one person says it must be so doesn't make it right or democratic. The review of the 2010 federal election recommended that intervention in party pre-selection by the National Executive should only occur as a last resort, rather than as a first resort, and only then in exceptional circumstances. There are many wonderful Indigenous members of the party in the Northern Territory who have now been denied the chance to replace me. This is grossly unfair, it's undemocratic, and it is not the Labor way. To those members of the National Executive and those who are sitting right now in this chamber, I hope you have thought long and hard about what the party will now do in the future to make sure that this is not unique, that this is just not a one-off pick. What is lacking is an effective Indigenous and active Indigenous Labor network. We need to see that engagement through fair democratic processes are now driven by you and those at the national level. The party must learn from this and must look to the future and engage with Indigenous members of the party seriously and genuinely to make systemic changes. And in the aftermath of this pre-selection intervention, the Northern Territory branch should now be given a seat at the National Executive. because we are currently not at that table. The members of the Party of the Northern Territory deserve at least some recognition for the way the branch has been treated. And the party should now commit to ensuring that all states and territories are part of this peak decision-making body. And finally, I must say something about the worst day of my Senate career, which wasn't in fact January of this year, but it was the announcement of the Northern Territory intervention. To move into people's lives and communities in this way left me speechless and helpless. These people that I had lived and worked with were humiliated and shamed, left to wonder why and how it had come to this. And then when we got government, they lobbied me continually to make the changes faster than we did, to recognise that support and assistance rather than intervention was needed. The final report of the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody says if there is one lesson we can learn from history, it is that solutions imposed from the outside will only create their own problems. And wow, isn't that so? Let's have a look at the last 5 years. The issue of giving back to Aboriginal people the power to control their own lives is therefore central to any strategies which are designed to address these underlying issues. Warren Mundine is right in his view that commercial development and economic solutions are the only chance for Indigenous communities to escape poverty. The rights-based agenda does need to be set aside, and government engagement officers need to be replaced with strategic economists and business developers. Incentives need to be given to businesses to get out into remote communities and to set up there. The Land Rights Act needs to be reviewed and modernised, and it is time to stop treating Indigenous affairs from a welfare point of view and to grow and develop the industries that they are competent in. I finally want to pay my respects to Dr. Yunupingu and his family. We talked together at Yirrkala and shared many moments. I hope to have more to say about that next week, but I offer my deepest sympathies to Gruwin, his wife, and to those who are mourning his loss. So let me finish by saying in Gumach, Kamat Guru Wana Guru, Gumach. Bichenara Yuru Gupun Garpan, Yungul Yunguna. Now I would like to thank the Yungul people. Billy Wallala Miritiri Gungangun Garmarangarangulpa Narana, because they have really helped me and taught me. Natali Nara Ganya Gurumingi, because when I got there I was full of my own white culture. Dinganyu Bala Lundun Miri, and now I have plenty of Yungul friends. Billina, that's all I want to say. So let me just leave by saying to you all, and Nigel, you'll get this. Nah, you mob. Chit nah.
Senator Conroy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Could I say thank you to Trish for that contribution. That was moving, and you are leaving on exactly the same terms you arrived. You joined the Senate in June 1998, representing the Northern Territory. As you mentioned, you've been re-elected 5 subsequent general elections, and you joined the Senate with a background of work in education in the community on the Gove Peninsula and an active union member. Over the years, Trish has extended her connections with Indigenous communities and presented their perspective and expertise in this chamber as uniquely as you just have again. This has brought an invaluable understanding to discussions in terms of how legislation will operate on the ground, and this has been particularly important for your work in committees. The area that comes to my mind and you've touched on this a number of times already, is your work on the Northern Territory intervention. It has been on the various committees monitoring and reviewing the effectiveness of the intervention, and has been extensive and highly valued over many years. In many respects, there is no more complex domestic issue for the government, and your input and your specialised knowledge that you've brought to those hearings and committee reports could not have made your family and your community more proud. I take this opportunity to say that your contribution has been greatly appreciated, and your dedication to improving the lives of Aboriginal people in the Northern Territory is widely acknowledged. In the last few years, you've also chaired the Legal and Constitutional Legislation Committee, and your work here again has been thorough, thoughtful and invaluable. Just to mention one recent inquiry conducted by this committee, the review of the human rights and anti-discrimination legislation was a major task, and it has added greatly to how the legislation will operate in the future. Your detailed and well-grounded committee work, and I can't believe the amount of hours you described those there, I'm sure if you included estimates as well, but incredible. And you've developed, as you've also shown in the chamber today and by the response here, cross-party relationships that at their best have made the Senate scrutiny of legislation and policy creative and constructive, and have brought the chamber together. As I said, you began your career in the Senate with a bang. I did go back and have a look at the valedictory, your first speech, to get a flavour and reminder of what happened at the time, and you mentioned it when you started. Your speech was notable for the thank you, as you've just given today in the language, Indigenous language. It was also notable because, as you've said, you pulled no punches then, you pulled none today, and you did draw a bit of a response at the time. You included a detailed critique of the cuts that were made to services in the Northern Territory by the then still relatively new Howard government. Your criticism drew a response from former Senator Van Staan, as has been mentioned, and resulted in your whole speech not being delivered, but those last paragraphs were incorporated into Hansard. And you have continued your fine tradition of pulling no punches. You do tragically support the Essendon Football Club. And I know that Mark is possibly not looking forward to discussing football with you as much as you're now planning on discussing with him. And I wasn't going to mention that, but now that you've mentioned it, yes, you did beat Carlton just a few weeks ago, and I know you do like. And I know that you do like to remind him of that regularly. I've also joined you on a number of occasions campaigning for the National Broadband Network, and I know that you joined me pulling fibre. And it is fitting, Trish, that just this week we've turned on the very first live services of the National Broadband Network in Darwin, and I know you'll take great pride in that because the naysayers have continued to campaign against it, but you have championed it in the Northern Territory every single day. I also want to take the opportunity to acknowledge and thank your family for the support that they have provided to you over the years. That was a staggering number of hours that you've been on a Qantas plane. I've always said to my friends and colleagues, it's tough enough living in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, you know, the little triangles, but to be a senator from Western Australia, the Northern Territory, far north Queensland, is an extraordinary commitment, and that is something that you have shouldered absolutely brilliantly. It is great to see so many of your family here today. Mark, your husband, as we said, a Carlton fan. He might want some sympathy from having to listen to you more often, but frankly, from a Collingwood fan, he's not going to get it. And don't call me to say, please, will you tell her to stop reminding me that we lost. To your son, Paul, your daughters, Melinda, Amanda, with baby Kobe and Kate. And it's also great to see so many of your staffers and former staffers here, the other group that each and every one of us know we cannot survive in this job They make us look great, and we could not do this job without them. The behind-the-scenes support and hard work. So I give you one final promise, Trish. I will personally collect that $50 from Dom, because one should always take money off a Carlton fan if one gets the chance. And I'll make sure that he hands it over at the end of the year. I want to congratulate you on 15 fantastic years, and I look forward to seeing you up in the Northern Territory, and possibly even Skyping you on the NBN when it's going.
Absolutely.
Senator Scully.
Thank you, Mr President. I rise on behalf of the Coalition to briefly respond to the final speech from Senator Crossin. As we know, Trish has been a Territorian, as we call it, and to achieve that you actually have to live there, a Territorian for some 30 years. As she's indicated, the first woman to come to federal parliament from the Northern Territory and the first to come to this place in the Senate. And it's interesting, if you want to know something about a parliamentarian, we normally go and we'll go through Google and find out her a maiden speech. And I did actually when I came here, and myself and Trish, and I'll relate to that in a moment, had quite an interesting relationship on the way here. But I can remember when I read her first speech how impressed I was that she was actually was the first to use certainly Yunulmartha in this place. And she made an undertaking to the people of not only her hometown at that stage of Yirrkala, but to northeast Arnhem Land. And she made a public undertaking, as she said, in Yunulmartha, amongst other things. She said, I'm going to make a public undertaking to work hard to represent you and to continue to respect and acknowledge your rights. And if you look back, you'll find that wherever Senator Crossin has gone, she has done just that, so good on you, mate. Senator Crossin is currently the Chair of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, and I think it's reasonable to say that you've had a brilliant career in terms of your work through the committee processes of this place, and a lot of people think that this place is all about the theatre of this chamber. But in the Senate, a lot of the work of the Senate and the work of Parliament is actually conducted through the committee process. It's a really important process to ensure that we get the legislation right. And Trish, you've done an absolutely unbelievable job in that regard. They say that the world's run by the people who turn up, and it's something I live by, and certainly I can recall wherever I was, Trish was turning up. And as a parliamentarian, as a politician, it's just terrific, and particularly in the Territory, you know, it's rained lightly in the morning, screaming down a dirt road. There hasn't been anyone here. Great. Labor aren't here, you know, where I can just go and talk to them on my own. But you sort of scream into a place, the dust settles, get out, how you going? And, oh, hey, no, get here. I come over, Trish is here, come on. So off we'd go, hey Trish, how's it going? What are you doing here? We'd glare at each other and sit down with the community and jointly listen. I don't think many of the communities actually understand a lot of the differences and the nuances in Parliament. They think, you know, we're both to blame for everything, and we're both trying to take the credit for everything. So that was certainly some of my recollections of Trish. She was just everywhere. We share a passions of the Territory. We're the same age, and we share the same address on seat 1A on the way down from Darwin to Canberra. So I certainly have to reflect on the difficulties that I appreciate, how far away you've been from the mob up there behind me. It was terrific to see you all here. I can remember one of the first times that I met Trish on the hustlings, and I'd actually there was a meeting in a radio station where Trish was absolutely flogging me for being an idiot, and I was actually such an idiot. I was on the way home from England trying to get rid of my British passport. I'd done everything except for drop kick a corgi, and I'd managed to just get home in time after having gone through that process, for those who can remember. Trish is just explaining what an idiot I am, and I've managed to get in there in time. So she, on the radio, checked mine, read it out. Yeah, I suppose that'll pass. You know, that was the sort of start of a great relationship. But The next time I met Trish, I was typical of an Aboriginal community. I was annoyed in the morning. We've got to go hunting. So, it's supposed to be the election day. Oh, it's all right. Off we've gone. It was fairly standard. It was a white Falcon station wagon, and part of the suspension had gone on the front. It had never been registered, I suspect. Anyway, the results of the morning's hunt were on the roof, and there was claret sort of running down onto the windscreen. And I was, perhaps I hadn't knocked all the chips off me then. I was dressed in a Hawaiian shirt. Said goodbye to my mates and stepped out, and there's Trish. So straight away, this is supposed to be my mortal opposition. I wasn't really sure what was supposed to happen. She's come over. Nige, how are you, mate? Good to meet you. Come on, I'll show you around. So, okay. I think the relationship has stayed pretty much that way. I often think that we're very different in the Territory. There's only 2 senators in the Territory, and so there really is an obligation to work together. We have been very close colleagues, and we've worked together, and some of the issues I don't think we've worked together on both sides. We've worked together when I was in government, and we've worked together when Trish has been in government, and I think any future Territorians who are considering these places, you'll find that's an essential, this relationship is an essential part of getting things done for Territorians. Look, the circumstances under which you leave this place are going to be more controversial and annoying Amanda Vanstone, although I know that was everybody here was mightily impressed. And I have to again reflect that I have my personal views about that is that I just don't understand. I don't think many of us will understand, and maybe in someone's memoirs they will throw some light on the fact that we have an Aboriginal woman, a traditional woman, who has been 10 years as a Labor minister. And we have Trish, who's been 15 years as an outstanding senator, are both standing for pre-selection in quite a reasonable pre-selection process. Trish was sharing with me she was a bit nervous because Marion Scrimgeour was a very, very good candidate. And then out of the blue, I saw Trish in Sydney, very distressing. Out of the blue, these things have happened. It was a reflection really on the Prime Minister's judgment and frankly her character. And I say that not in a political sense, mate, but it is a great sadness to me. It's sad that Kevin still isn't here at this stage, but I'm not sure about the machinations of the next week, and again I don't wish to pour any porridge on your day, but don't mention the war. But Kevin, if you're listening, mate, and you are going to do something, there is still time to undo a great wrong. There is still time, mate. So on behalf of the Coalition and the Territory, mate, thank you.
Here. Well said.
Just one. Senator Seawood.
Thank you, Mr. President. Trish, I'm going to miss you a huge amount. Because of the shadow portfolios and spokespeople roles that I hold, I have worked a lot with Trish and Nigel, and I'm not a Territorian, but I suspect I've spent more time in the Territory than most of our Senate colleagues. I've been in the Territory in community with Trish on many occasions, and I can't tell you how highly regarded Senator Crossin and Trish is in those communities. It is quite obvious the minute you go into communities with Trish and just seeing everybody come up to her and be asking her questions about what's going on and showing their respect to the work that you do. It's been a great learning experience for me to be in community with you. I likewise remember my worst day in here, which was when they announced the intervention. I had a group of Central Australian traditional owners in my office the day it was announced, and I will, to the day I die, remember the tears flowing down their face when they heard the news. And I swore then I would fight to oppose it, and I will continue to oppose it, and its new invention as Stronger Futures, because I still don't think that that Stronger Futures has given that control and decision-making to communities. Likewise, I shared and we spoke on many occasions about SEAM and the introduction of SEAM. But I've also deeply respected the chairing of committees on the committees that I have participated in, Legal and Constitutional Affairs. And I must say, I think the very generous time you have given me in estimates to ask questions, and also the fair way that you have handled the inquiries, the many inquiries that I've been a part of, that you have chaired. Likewise, the relatively brief time we've had to spend on the Joint Committee on Constitutional Recognition, I'm very sorry that you will not be chairing that committee, because I think that you have done a great job and also want to see constitutional recognition achieved. The work that you have done, I think, for Aboriginal communities and Torres Strait Islander communities has been outstanding. And I think a measure of that is whenever I have, since the announcement in January, whenever I have been in community or with members of the Aboriginal community, they have actually raised with me what's going on. What have they done to Trish? And shown a great level of disappointment that Trish was treated in the manner in which she was treated, but that she will no longer be a senator, and a senator that speaks so passionately on communities' interests, and ensuring that in all ways how any of these bills affect Aboriginal people and Aboriginal communities are also taken into account. I also remember the time that we have spent adding up numbers for those issues that you talked about, RU486 and stem cells. Again, I've said in this place before, those occasions where we work across the parties in this place, I think show the best of this parliament and this chamber, is where we all get to work together across parties on various issues. As I said, many people are greatly disappointed that you will no longer be in this place. I will miss your chairing of the committees. I will miss being able to rant and rave with you around bad policies. I will miss the advice that you give on how policies affect the Territory and affect Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Your presence here will be greatly missed. I greatly value your input, and the respect that you obviously have in this place is on show here today. The respect that you have from Nigel and that he has shown to you, and the camaraderie that you Territorians show, I hope continues in this place, because I know that you both do your best. I disagree with you on many occasions, but I know that you genuinely do your best to represent the interests of Territorians. I wish you well. I wish your family well. It's nice to see faces, put faces to the names that I've heard talk about. I've met Kate when she was smaller, but it's nice to put faces to names that I've heard so much about over the years. And Trish's mum, hi. Sorry, your sister. Trish's mum, sorry, I've heard. Oh, okay. Hi, Trish's mum. I've also heard a lot of stories about you too. It's what we actually do talk a lot about our families when we're on the road together, because we all miss our families. So we all share lots of stories about our families. And Trish has shared lots about you. It's all good, mostly, except for the time when the mud crabs were thrown out instead of the cane toads. I'll always remember that story. The rest of you will have to ask Trish about that one. They were frozen mud crabs that were thrown out. We'll miss you, Trish. Well done, and congratulations. You are able to look back on 15 fantastic years of achievement. Thank you.
Senator Moore.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. It's a real honour to be able to share in acknowledging my friend Trish Crossin. In terms of the attributes, we're all going to mention it. So many people are going to share in making the same kinds of words, but I want to start by thanking Team Crossin, because one of the real strengths of this woman is her family and her friends. There are many here, and also her staff members, because you work as a genuine team, and that gives Trish the ability that she has shown for so many years to live out the total commitment and passion she has for the people of the Northern Territory. When I first came here, I knew Trish, I knew of her. I'd worked with her husband Mark in the Northern Territory years ago. But her first words were to me, "Welcome, mate, you've got a job to do." And I was sitting beside her the same way as I'm sitting beside you tonight, over in that area. I then learned that during the process of the Senate, she knew all the rules, because Trish is a teacher, she's an educator, and she actually shares knowledge. And one of the things she shared with me was the way the Senate operated, and gave me advice through the day, and also gave me advice about the other people in the place and little bits of information about them. She also showed me, because when I first came here, I was terrified about the need of asking a question. And as you know, we're given questions to ask, and you're very careful about them, and you get them and you go, "Oh, I don't know." Trish is the only person I know who checks every question for grammar and punctuation, and then changes the question to make sure that they're accurate. In terms of the process, that education was so important to so many of us, because as we've heard from Senator Siewert, the issues we have in dealing with the Northern Territory and issues of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander rights, Trish is overwhelmingly generous in giving support and knowledge to other people about the very important historical backgrounds of her patch. She has provided me with visas on many occasions to come to the Northern Territory into her area, and also when we are there, as we've heard from Nigel and also from Rachel, the obvious respect and affection which is given to Trish by her people. And all Territorians are her people. She represents that territory with pride. But there's something extraordinary about going into an Aboriginal community with this woman, because the warmth and respect that the people have for Trish is given to us because we're with her. She takes us with her as her friend, and we receive that welcome with her. And I've had the joy on many occasions going into community. One case recently, Nigel, remember, where we had the full welcoming with spears in terms of the process, but nonetheless, in terms of the knowledge and the passion that Trish has, she is a valiant warrior for rights and justice. And in terms of the discussions we've had many times around legislation, and she mentioned some of that in her speech, things that we genuinely believe should be changed. And she took that fight up to people in this place, across the chamber, in ministerial offices, and even when we didn't get the answers we wanted, the fight continued and will continue. Because when Trish leaves this place as a senator, if anyone thinks that her engagement in the issues, if her genuine commitment to equity will not be taken up in another way, they don't know Team Crossin. They don't know. The fight will continue. I particularly want to acknowledge Trish's strength in having our backs through some very difficult times. And Ruth Webber is in the chamber and she knows, in terms of processes where we were gathering support, where we didn't always have the support from the areas we thought we would have. But Trish Crossin in this place was always with us. And one of her absolute attributes is her direct honesty and the fact that she will tell it how it is. It may not matter that it's not what you wanted to hear, and it may not matter that she'll be questioning things that you think you're doing well, but she will give her advice, not in a hurtful way ever. I have never known this woman to be hurtful in her contribution, but what I do know is that you are left in no doubt about what the impact of your decisions will be, whether you're doing it right, and how you better stand up straight too. I remember that. But in terms of process, she was very generous in mentioning the Parliamentary Group on Population and Development. There have been through issues with that group, and at different times where always she was there for us in terms of the support and her work with the Friends of the Indonesia area and the desperate issues of poverty and need in that place. The fact that she's there always making sure that we do our job, because the overwhelming focus of Trish's work in this place is doing her job. Nigel quoted from what she told the people in the community, that when she was here to represent the Northern Territory, that was her job, and she has done it. Thank you, Trish, for your inspiration, for your challenge, always for your challenge, because that's what makes us always stronger. We have too many endless stories about that football club in terms of the process that, wherever we were, we had to get scores. We had to know, I know the colours of the club, which is lovely. And in terms of the way we actually move forward, it's once again, and I know the work that Mark and the family and you do to encourage sport, and across the board sport in the Territory, and how that is a way for people to actually have opportunities and expectations for the future, which is what you've always said. You wanted to ensure that there was real opportunity for all the people of the Territory, but particularly for the Indigenous people. Thank you for your work in committees, because it is so important, and Rachel's pointed out the way that you take your job as a chair. I see the Secretariat from Legal and Constitution up there. They are a great group. They've told me that there's been over 200 committees that you've chaired. I don't even know how many hours that comes into, but you know that you've just had 6 more bills given to you yesterday, I've been told by the Secretariat. That should be good fun for you for the next few days to knock off those last few. They should be up there. I do want to mention one point, and the people have mentioned the difficult committees that Trish has worked through, where there was passion and conflict and the need for a straight bat. Sporting analogy there, Trish. And in terms of what we're going to do, that is where we're moving forward. But I want to talk about something. Trish was aware that in one of her committees, her Secretariat was getting a hard time from some of the witnesses, important witnesses who felt strongly about issues and were actually overstepping the mark in how they were approaching the Secretariat and demanding action and processes. Trish, as chair of that committee, actually stepped in immediately and ensured that her people were not going to be subject to bullying, and stood up and said, this is not the right way to behave, and did her job again. So, Trish, what I want to say is thank you. You are the kind of person that we talk about when we tell people about the Senate. And when we say, what does a senator do? The kinds of things that we're going to hear this evening actually reflects what a senator does. Congratulations to you personally, to your family, and not only has it been a pleasure working with you, and we will continue working together, there's no doubt about that, it has been an honour to be a member of the Senate beside you.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks very much.
Senator Stevens.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Acting Deputy President, and can I just add a few words this evening to thank and congratulate Trish for her contribution to public life, and as Senator Moore has just said, we haven't heard the end of Trish. She may be leaving us, but there is definitely life after the Senate, and for someone like Trish, who is so much an advocate for public policy and fairness, we know that she's not going to go away. But I'd just like to say that there are some times in your life when you meet someone who has a very formative impact on you. And I think that there would be everybody here who has served as a senator with Trish would say that Trish is definitely one of those people. She, as we've heard, she was very generous in the way in which she has mentored and supported people in this place. Very kind to all of us who come in trying to make sense of how this place works. And as Senator Moore just said, as a teacher and an educator, she has just the gift of being able to make those things so much easier and so much simpler. So I know that Trish has been sitting here for nearly an hour, as have her family, and we're going to have lots of opportunities to thank and acknowledge Trish's work, and many speakers have already talked about the specific work that she has done in this place. And we all have great personal memories of our relationship with Trish, which we will celebrate in some other occasions. So, in deference to her past work as a teacher, and in recognition of how Trish always pares away the inessentials to get right to the heart of the matter, I was having a conversation with the clerk, and we discussed what kind of a poem Trish deserved. And so I've decided to apply the discipline of a sonnet for you tonight, Trish. And here it is. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? I think I'll just resist the great temptation and take this opportunity to pay a tribute to your fine work for the nation. Since '98, you've worked for the Northern Territory, dragging us round the country in your zeal. Indigenous rights were just one specialty you wanted us to see to make it real. On petrol sniffing, migration and health, committees were the beneficiaries of your insights and knowledge, and the wealth of fun we had in Ireland, what a wheeze. I'll miss you, Trish, and hope we will remain friends long after both our times in Canberra ends.
Lovely, Senator Stevens. Senator Carr.
Yes. Madam Acting Deputy President, I want to pay tribute to the political career of Senator Trish Crossin. She has served her community, she served this Senate, she served her party with distinction. In the 15 years that I have known her in this place, she's been an outstanding senator. Now, in the Northern Territory, the role of the senator is very different from other jurisdictions. Electorally, demographically, geographically, the senator in the Northern Territory plays a very different role, and of course has different sets of responsibilities than many of us would have in other states. Senator Crossin's duties have taken her to some of the most remote and some of the most disadvantaged communities in this nation, and she has served those people incredibly well. Whether it's be on the Indian Ocean territories or whether it be in the remote deserts communities of the Northern Territory, she has been there on the job for those people. And while, of course, she has also fulfilled her duties with incredible dedication to the urban areas, to the city, Darwin, the big towns in the Northern Territory. She's been a servant of this chamber through her committee work, and I think a former Senator, Scott Despoil, once described her as a workhorse. I mean, I think that was meant to be an extraordinary compliment. I have had the opportunity to work with her in the Education Committee, and through that work I was able to really appreciate her humour and her humanity. We have seen her work in Indigenous communities through the Indigenous work of this chamber in terms of reconciliation, which has been a matter of great service to this nation. She was the first woman to represent the Northern Territory in this Parliament, and she has worked tirelessly for women's rights and for social justice in her time here. She's maintained her commitments in terms of local sporting organisations and the asthma foundations and medical institutes and medical advancement in the Northern Territory, as well as the Northern Territory Women's Centre. And she does that on the basis of having to go back to Darwin at a level I find quite extraordinary. She's often complained to me about how little time I've spent in the Northern Territory. You don't have to spend a lot of time there to appreciate how difficult it is for senators to represent those communities. Her service to the Labor Party, I think, deserves particular recognition, because it's not just the community that she's chosen to serve so well. She's been unflinching, whether it be at a local branch secretary and the Buffalo Creek branch to president of the Territory branch itself. She, of course, has been a stalwart and, I think, a key player in the election of a Labor government in the Northern Territory. And I can tell you, when I was at school, the idea of a Northern Territory Labor government was something people dreamt about. I think that she's been extraordinary in her work here in this Parliament through the Labor Party, the Status of Women's Committee, for instance. And of course, I have come to know her on the various trips to the Northern Territory where she has sought to explain the politics of the Northern Territory from a Labor point of view, which is in itself an education. I had the opportunity to listened to a broadcast recently of Senator Crossin's, or description of Senator Crossin's journey to the political representation of the Labor Party in this chamber. I want to share that with the Senate. It was broadcast on the ABC. After growing up as a self-described working-class family in Melbourne's western suburbs, they're wrong about that, it was actually in the northern suburbs, but Senator Crossin was lured to the top end for a teaching position in 1980. And she said, "I've been teaching for 3 years and Mark and I decided to have a bit of adventure." You can imagine how that was described at home. "We applied to the Commonwealth Teaching Service and got offered a teaching position at UCALA. Now, I was also a member of the Commonwealth Teaching Service about the same time, but I got posted to Glenroy Tech, and I suspect that you actually got the short end of the stick in that regard. We had a 5-year-old son at the time, so we opted to go to UCALA, and we're only ever going to go there for 2 years, and we were, of course, going to come back. At first, it was hard for a city girl to adapt to the new environment. I had an immense cultural shock. It took a very long time to adapt. A very, very long time to adapt. I'd come from the heart of Melbourne. I was a city girl. I arrived in a town that didn't have fresh milk back then, had ABC TV taped and relayed to us 24 hours later. I was even told not to bring all my white goods from Melbourne. They'd all be supplied. And that when we got in a house in UCALA, there'd be one of those old washing machines that you had to put the clothes through yourself with a hand wringer. I had long blonde hair, and in my first month my hair got stuck in the wringer and Mark had to cut it to release me. And I cried and packed my bags and walked to the airport many, many, many times. I had a lot of trouble adapting. Now, Senator Crossin says, this is the report from the ABC, said it was the generosity and spirit of the Indigenous people in the community that led her to stay and inspired her to move into politics. Just the realisation that there were such enormous inequalities, and that in terms of access to health services and houses, she said. And also I believe that there needed to be more women in politics, actually. There needed to be women in Parliament. They needed to be people who could stand up and relate to those working women raising a family experience on a day-by-day basis. Now, I was one of the 2 members of the National Executive of the Australian Labor Party that opposed Senator Crossin's disendorsement. I did so because I believed no case had been made for that action to take place. I maintain that view. Now, this was a particularly significant intervention because the process for pre-selection had actually commenced in the Northern Territory. And I don't recall an experience of that anywhere else in this country where a process had actually commenced and to have intervention at that point. And while I wish Trish's successor every success, as I do every single endorsed Labor candidate across this Commonwealth, I still maintain that, Trish, you were treated unjustly. Senator Crossin will have very big shoes to fill. I'd also like to take this opportunity to remind the chamber that Senator Crossin was a national co-convener of Emily's List. And she was a very, very active supporter of more Indigenous women participating in parliaments across this country. And she'd actually taken practical steps to see that through. I might also add that Senator Crossin and I had other conversations about her replacement, which was to be an Indigenous person. So I was particularly disappointed in the position that Emily's List took in regard to this pre-selection. Now, I've never bought the line that Emily's List doesn't get involved in pre-selections. And frankly, I thought they let the whole team down in this matter. So Trish and Mark and your entire family, I wish you very well in civilian life, and thank you for the service you rendered.
Senator Brandis.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. I wanted to add a few words of my own in tribute to our colleague, Senator Trish Crossin. I first came to work with Senator Crossin closely when, after the election of the Rudd government in 2007, she became the chair of the Senate Legal and Constitutional, don't laugh yet, Senator Crossin, Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee, and I became, as Shadow Attorney General, I suppose the principal coalition participant in that committee. And so for the last 5.5 years, Senator Crossin and I have shared the Senate Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee. Now, Madam Acting Deputy President, an unastute observer watching some of the sessions of the Senate Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee over the last few years might have jumped to the erroneous conclusion that Senator Crossin and I didn't get on very well, because there were certainly a number of occasions, a number of, may I say, splenetic occasions, some very splenetic explosions from the chair at what Senator Crossin perhaps thought were liberties that I was taking in the examination of witnesses, and we did have the occasional cross word, but nevertheless it would be a superficial view, Madam Acting Deputy President, to think that we didn't get on very well. And in fact, with the passage of time, I grew to be a great admirer of the way that Senator Trish Crossin conducted the affairs of that committee, and perhaps I'm not the easiest person to rein in when I'm in an exuberant or expansive mood. Some have said that, but Senator Crossin never seemed to have any difficulty in doing so and in pulling me up. So Senator Crossin, thank you, and congratulations on the way in which you conducted the affairs of that committee so professionally and so well for so long. In fact, you received a compliment about your conduct of the affairs of that committee from a slightly unusual source earlier this year, when Mr. Peter Coleman, a former leader of the opposition in the New South Wales Parliament, a former minister in the New South Wales government, a former member of the House of Representatives, and therefore no stranger to parliamentary committee procedure, made some observations about you in his column in The Spectator magazine. And I thought I might celebrate the occasion by reading this into the record, Senator Crossin. This is what Peter Coleman had to say in The Spectator of the 2nd of February this year. He'd taken himself along to the Sydney hearings of the inquiry you were conducting into the Human Rights and Anti-Discrimination Bill, and he had this to say: Senator Crossin has been far more active than most in the daily work of the Senate, especially in its committees. Currently in the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee, inquiring into the draft Human Rights and Anti-Discrimination Bill 2012, which purports to consolidate, simplify and clarify 5 existing Commonwealth Anti-Discrimination Acts. And he went on to observe about your conduct as the chair. He said, Senator Crossin kept the exchanges moving along, stuck to the timetable and maintained order. She did it professionally and senatorially, despite the occasional provocative intervention from Senator Brandis. Senator Crossin was competent, experienced and fair. It is hard to find any convincing reason why the Prime Minister should purge her. I'll come back to that. The other committee with which I've served closely with Senator Crossin in the last 12 months is on the Joint Select Committee on the Constitutional Recognition of Indigenous Peoples. Senator Crossin has been the chair and I've been the deputy chair. I think it's a shame, Madam Acting Deputy President, that the general public sees senators in a combative mode, which is part of part of the parliamentary process, to have a combative mode across the chamber. But it seldom sees members of Parliament in the collaborative mode, which the committee system of the Parliament fosters and engenders. And if you'd seen Senator Crossin and I and all the other members of that committee, including our dear friend Senator Scullion, working in an entirely non-partisan way, in a collaborative, cooperative spirit, to bring together the consensus to achieve in the next Parliament the fitting constitutional recognition of the first Australians, which all of us are committed to doing, then I think the public would have a very different perception and a much fuller and more rounded perception of the way Parliament works. And once again, Senator Crossin, I think it's a tragedy that you will not be there to fulfil your work as the chair of that committee, but you were the inaugural chair of it, and if at some time in the life of the next Parliament the recognition of the first Australians in the Australian Constitution is achieved by a successful referendum carried on a bipartisan basis, then there will be few, if any, who will have contributed more to that outcome than you will have done. Now, Madam Acting Deputy President, I wasn't going to refer to the unpleasantness that occurred in the Labor Party earlier this year, but it didn't stop Senator Carr and others, so I thought I might as well. I've been a member of the Liberal Party for all my adult life, so I am no stranger to brutal acts and dark deeds. But I must say I have never in all of my political life seen anything so brutal and unfair and disgusting perpetrated by a political party upon one of its own than that which was perpetrated upon Senator Crossin by the current Prime Minister when she was, with no process at all and for no sufficient reason, in fact for no good reason at all, summarily dismissed, having been properly pre-selected and being in the mid-career of a first-rate parliamentary career. I thought it was disgraceful, and I doubt there are many people in this Parliament, regardless of their party or factional affiliation, who would not share that view. I think you were very, very, very shabbily treated, Senator Crossin, and I feel sorry for you. Those who executed this attack upon you, which effectively terminated a very, very constructive and useful parliamentary career, should be very ashamed. But sadly, I suspect they're not, because they are beyond shame. As it happened, the political assassination of Senator Crossin by Julia Gillard occurred during the time when Senator Crossin was chairing the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee's hearings into the Human Rights and Anti-Discrimination Bill. And Senator Crossin arrived at those hearings in Melbourne on the 21st of March. So I'm sorry, the 23rd of January, I've got the date wrong, the 23rd of January this year, within 36 hours of the undoubtedly unpleasant interview which he had with the Prime Minister at the Lodge. And Senator Crossin was, I think it's fair to say, shaken. And in a spirit of senatorial solidarity, I think I'm allowed to say this, Madam Acting Deputy President, Senator Crossin did somewhat confide in me about what had just been done to her. And little did we know that a very alert photographer was in the chamber of the committee room, and that very alert photographer snapped a marvellous photograph of Senator Crossin confiding in me, which I might frame and present to you as a parting gift, Senator Crossin, in which I hope I am exhibiting the appropriate collegial and pastoral concern and patience. I am shameless, that's true. Senator Crossin, I don't know why this was done. Perhaps the party that you have represented with some distinction for so long feels ashamed that after 42 years after Neville Bonner first took his seat in this chamber as a Queensland Liberal senator, as the first Indigenous representative in this chamber, the Australian Labor Party has not given us an Indigenous representative in the Commonwealth Parliament. And I'm bound to say, even when your designated successor takes her place, the Australian Labor Party will not have given us an Indigenous senator who was chosen through an orthodox pre-selection process. I think but whatever the reason, whatever the motive, you should never have been the victim. And all of your colleagues, certainly all of your colleagues from the Coalition, feel enormous sympathy for your position and, if I may say so, also respect for the dignity with which you have borne such an unjust reversal of fortune. Senator Crossin, you have been a person who everyone in this chamber would acknowledge as an honest person, as a decent person, as a person who was passionate about the causes you believed in, as a person who was extraordinarily hardworking, and have made of your years in this place a really, really substantial impact. I try to understand politics, but there is one part of politics I have never been able to understand, and that is the inner workings of the Australian Labor Party. I've never been able to understand why, Senator Crossin, you were never a frontbencher, because certainly from those of us on this side of the chamber, there are very, very few who would disagree with me that you were a lot more able than certain other Labor Party frontbenchers in this place that we have seen, including some of the current ones. But thus are the vicissitudes of political fortune. If we set ourselves the test when we come here, how would we hope to be remembered, and what achievements and accomplishments would we wish to make the life of our nation a better place? Then you have fulfilled the tests and aspirations that you no doubt set yourself with flying colours, and you have earned the affection and respect of political friend and political opponent alike.
Senator McLucas.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. I'll make a short contribution because I'm sure there are others who would like to contribute today. Trish, I pay tribute to you for many reasons, but as a senator from Northern Australia, we have a different way of looking at the world, and we were able to do that together. We came into the Parliament, Joseph and I came into the Parliament very shortly after you did, and so our time here has been matched up in many respects. But so I sort of call you this sort of class of '98, or you were a couple of months early. Trish is an extraordinary, generous and thoughtful person. When I was elected, Trish was one of the first people to contact me as a person not even from my state, but I think recognising the fact that we are Northerners and our way of thinking. We can talk another language. We know when people talking about throwing out the wrong bag out of the freezer, I knew it was the toads, not the crabs. I got that one. But you've contributed in the principles you bring to the Senate are the principles that have stayed the same, and I've observed that over a long time. You sent me a T-shirt that said a woman's place is in the Senate, and that has stood the test of time. You have shown great feminist values and principles that have never wavered. We worked together. We established an inquiry within some months of coming into this place, into the operations of the northern prawn fishery, and I think that was a bit of a baptism of fire for both of us, but we got through that, and we established that committee, so that was a bit of fun. But your knowledge and compassion was brought to bear on many, many committees, and I particularly refer to the Joint Parliamentary Committee for Native Title, where we did a lot of work in those early years around the observance of how the Native Title Act was operational. You're a straight talker. You call a spade a shovel. I think a lot of people have said that tonight, and I value that. And I think we all do value the frankness, but the decency that you bring to the deliberations you've made. Politics is a tough game. We know that. You know it more. But I acknowledge that you can be very, very proud of the contribution that you've made, as can your family be very, very proud of the contribution you've made over many years. I know that contribution will continue to flow, and I hope that we continue to maintain a strong friendship across that border. Thank you.
Senator Cameron.
Thank you. And firstly, can I indicate that I'm extremely pleased to have been here to listen to a fantastic speech. You started your career in controversy and you are finishing your career in controversy. And I think that's not a bad thing, Senator Crossin. And I think, the last thing you would want to do is come to this place and spend a lot of years and someone ask you, had you been in the Senate? People will know you've been in the Senate, I must say, because your contribution has been fantastic. And I just want to thank you for the personal support and the personal friendship that you've given me in my time in the Senate. It was fantastic, and you welcomed me not only to the Senate, but to your home, along with Mark and your family, when I came up to the Northern Territory on parliamentary business. Thanks for that. And you've also welcomed my family from overseas to your home when they've come from overseas. You are a great friend, and your family are a great family. And you are, I think, the epitome of what we should be looking for in this place. A trade union activist, a community activist, a parliamentary activist, someone who knows where they want to go, can articulate your values and stand up for the things that you think are important. And that's how I've always found you, Trish, and it's been a pleasure to have worked with you for not all of your career, but for a short time in your career. And it's because of, I think, the genuine warmth that everyone here talks about tonight. Not in any confected way, but in a genuine way, that I think people were appalled at the treatment that was meted out to you. And as a personal friend, I was appalled, and I took the view that I should say something about it both publicly, and I want to say something about it again tonight. Sure, politics is a tough game. Sure, politics means that you cannot take anything for granted. But there are some common decencies, I think, that should be in politics. And that is, if someone has made a contribution, like the contribution you've made to your community, to your trade union, to the Parliament, then you should be treated with common decency and dignity. And you have made a contribution over many years. And I am appalled at the treatment that my party treated you with. And I hope that we never see the likes of that again. Because when you make a contribution, it's not only you that makes that contribution, it's your family, it's your staff, it's your friends, it's the other members of the Labour Party in the Northern Territory that help make that contribution, because nobody comes here and makes a contribution as an individual. You come here in a collective. And I would have thought that after the collective work that you've done, the commitment on every tough issue in this Parliament, the commitment on every progressive issue on this Parliament, you should have been treated with fairness and dignity. And you were not, and that's a shame for the Labour Party to have been involved in that. So I want to say that I hope that, given the broad support that you have across the Senate, that you can find another career because your capacity and your contribution is still fantastic. You have got a lot of contribution, in my view, to make to public life in this country. You've made a huge contribution, but I think you can make a bigger contribution. And I hope that your family will continue to support you making a public contribution, because it is so important that people of just basic human decency like yourself can make a contribution after the Senate. Sure, it's a tough game, but it should not be a brutal game. And the recognition should be there for the work that you have done over many years. And I, for one, will continue to publicly say that the contribution you made was fantastic, that your treatment was abominable, that you should never have been treated like that, and you should enjoy, in my view, a career into the future, knowing that you have got many friends, many supporters, many colleagues, and many good comrades in this place who will wish you and your family well for the future. Thanks for your friendship. Thanks for your political activism. Thanks for being a great trade unionist. Thanks for being a great community activist. You are a great person. We will miss you. This place will be worse off for you going. And I hope that you can continue to make a strong contribution into the future. Thanks, Trish. Thanks.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. It is a great honour for me to be able to speak this evening to pay my respects to Senator Crossin's wonderful career in this place. And I want to begin by talking about my experiences on the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee, and I think to echo much of what Senator Brandis said, but also to acknowledge Senator Crossin's capacity to engage with the issues and to actually drive solutions into the committee reports from the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee that has resulted in more change than I think many senators in this place get to achieve in many years of contribution across a great range of issues. And Senator Crossin has done that, just through the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee, like the kinds of changes that you've been able to drive through the committee reports that I've seen will make a real difference to the lives of many Australians. I also have the great honour of being with Senator Crossin on the National Capital and External Territories Committee. And Christmas Island and Cocos Island are wonderful and extraordinary places, and it's been delightful that Senator Crossin has been able to introduce me to the communities there and introduce me to the very significant issues that confront those communities. And I don't think it is any surprise or that you have such a good understanding because of your passion and love for the place, but also as a, if you like, a Territorian senator, you understand the lack of representation that you have at a state level in terms of the extraordinary powers that the Commonwealth has over the territories. Over the territories to, intervene on things like the intervention. And it has been, of great concern to me to witness, the common issues that exist between Western Australia and the Northern Territory and the very different way that they are managed simply because the Territory doesn't exercise its own state powers. And I guess in that note, it's been, fairly significant to me to know that you have faced an election every election, unlike other senators in this place, and that you've done that for some 14 years. To note that the way that you were eventually undone in your pre-selection in this place, and it is a matter of regret to me that I will not have the opportunity to serve with you longer in this place. touching again on the Indigenous issues that are in common across the communities that we represent. Your capacity to have embedded yourself and be part of Indigenous culture, I think I know and appreciate what an honour it is to have the opportunity to be able to do that. But it is a significant cultural divide in this country, and we have a very westernised parliament here, and it is of great significance to me that you are one of the people in here that can really break that down for ordinary Australians and to bridge that cultural divide. And it is a divide that I hope more parliamentarians engage in, because, so many Australians are ignorant of the enormous depth and diversity of Australia's Indigenous cultures. And there can be no culture, no Indigenous culture, without an Indigenous economy and without autonomy for Indigenous cultures over that economy. And to value the intrinsic economy that exists in culture when you give it autonomy. And that was something that, indeed, as you highlight in regards to the intervention, is the complete opposite way of empowering these communities. Trish, your contribution to the Status of Women Committee, it's a great joy to me as a Labor feminist to have had your guidance as a previous chair, and to share that mutual commitment that we and many other Labor women have. And indeed, it is the great sense of solidarity that helps me get through the long periods of time that we spend away from our family and our homes. And, I think that sense of solidarity is something you've certainly offered to me and to other Labor women. Finally, I want to say thank you on behalf of Australia's LGBTI community. You have been a really wonderful advocate for our community, and you have made a real difference. Thank you.
Thank you. It now being 6:30, the Senate is suspended till 7 p.m.